Hi, my name is VGaldamez, and this week's presentation and reading consisted of many different topics. However, the main topics of this week's presentation was how our attitudes are shaped and formed and what influences our attitudes to be changed. An attitude is defined as a positive, negative, or mixed reaction to a person, object, or idea. The way and how others see our reactions is how they see our attitudes. Oftentimes, the words that are used to describe attitudes include love, dislike, hate, admire, and many more. So, for example, when it comes to food, an example that would be like, I love to eat pizza. However, I hate eating Brussels sprouts. This shows that our positive or negative reactions to certain things will have an influence in the way others see us, or they'll get to know us better as well. So overall, our attitudes represent a unique relation between us and that specific attitude towards the object that we're assessing. And also, they reveal that as individuals, we differ not only to others, but also how quickly we react to topics. Because attitudes are so important, one of the things social psychologists are trying to work on, and they're still working on today, is how our attitudes are measured. There are several different ways in which they have found that our attitudes are measured. For example, self-reports are the easiest way to do that, to assess our attitudes. One way to go about that is through the attitude scale. The attitude scale is a multiple item questionnaire that is designed to measure a person's attitudes towards certain objects. Each question will reveal how strongly an individual agrees or disagrees with each statement that is given. Another form of self-reports is the bogus pipeline. The bogus pipeline is a phony lie detector device that is not used as much as the attitude scale, but it gives the participants a more truthful answer to sensitive subjects that occur in our society. So when researchers want a more honest opinion, they'll often use this as a technique. It makes it easier to detect between positive and negative attitudes that are oftentimes not seen with the naked eye. Social psychologists today are now starting to use different forms of brain imaging to detect how the brain responds to different things. For example, they're starting to use fMRIs. The implicit association test is also another way in which psychologists measure our attitudes, and what that basically does is it detects the speed in which people respond to pairing of different concepts, such as black and white or good and bad, and they're easier to detect. So I guess the big fundamental question is how our attitudes form. So attitudes can be formed through either a learned behavior, or they can even be inherited. According to several research done on twins that were raised apart, they demonstrated that people can actually be predisposed to hold certain attitudes because they found that the twins held similar views even though they had grown apart. And of course, our attitudes can be shaped through what we learn and what we see growing up. So our parents can influence that, but also our peers and even the media. One study done by Lindsay Levitin and Brad Hurls revealed that many people can sometimes adjust their attitudes to down any disagreements and express views that are more compliant with others and conform when surrounded by others who disagree. This shows us that even though we already have set attitudes on certain subjects, we may sometimes change them due to the fact that we don't either A, want to argue with someone, or B, just want to simply be like or avoid problems with them as well. This leads us into our next topic, which is persuasion. Persuasion is the process by which our attitudes are changed, and there are two different ways in which that can happen. For example, an individual that thinks carefully and logically about the communication that it's given to them, they are influenced by the strength of the argument. They are using the central route to persuasion. However, if the individual does not think carefully about the communication that is given to them, and they are mostly being influenced by superficial cues, then they are using the peripheral route to persuasion. The individuals that use the central route to persuasion usually are less likely to sway their opinions because they have higher self-esteem and they think through their actions more logically. Another way in which we are persuaded by others is through individuals' emotional expressions. For example, a current research demonstrated that others' emotional expressions can shift our attitudes as well. For example, when the participants reported having a more positive attitude towards various topics, when the source's facial expression was happy rather than sad, the same thing went if the source's attitude and facial expressions were sad, then the participants would also report having negative attitudes towards that same topic. There are many factors that influence one's persuasion, as the ones shown here in the slide, but the two that I want to mainly focus on are subliminal messages and culture. Subliminal messages have been used for quite some time now. The first experiment was done in the 1950s when the words "drink Coke" and "eat popcorn" were shown on the screens to their audience. However, the words only appeared for a few seconds and the audience didn't even notice it. However, the researchers noticed that the Coke sales and popcorn sales did increase after that showing. In another study, participants were subliminally presented with the name of specific soft drinks such as the Lipton iced tea, and they were later most likely to report that they would select that particular brand of soft drinks over others that were given to them. This shows that subliminal messages can influence the way we think and feel about certain topics. However, there are other forms in which subliminal messages can be presented. They can be presented through sight, smell, sounds, and many more that appeal to the five senses. Culture is another huge factor that influences our persuasion. For example, in Western countries, such as here in the United States, it is found that advertisements mostly focus on personal benefits, individuality, competition, and self-improvement, as in Eastern cultures, Asian cultures, they appeal more to integrity, achievement, and the well-being of one's in-groups. This shows how different cultures appeal to those that reside in that region in order to persuade them. This leads us to our next topic, which is cognitive dissonance. The cognitive dissonance theory refers to the holding that inconsistent cognitions arouses psychological tension that people become motivated to reduce. When we become aware that we simultaneously hold two or more inconsistent cognitions, we can experience an unpleasant state of psychological tension, which is what leads to cognitive dissonance. So, for example, if someone is on a diet, but yet they eat a tube full of ice cream, then that person is experiencing cognitive dissonance because they know they shouldn't be eating that ice cream, yet they did. So oftentimes they will try to justify their actions in some way. One reason that we may become psychologically tense is because we want to have a great perception of self, as well as wanting others to see us in a certain way, which is why we experience cognitive dissonance, and as well as experiencing the impression management theory, which refers to having tension between the need to present oneself in a certain way, as well as having that positive evaluation being endangered by our actions. This leads to our conclusion. We have learned that our attitudes can be changed in different ways. They can be changed through communication from others, persuasion within ourselves, and our culture. All these things help shape the way in which we think. Thank you for listening.